So, as we lead up to the Wellness Medicine Summit this year, they've asked us to record a short video thinking about how we live in a time of COVID and Corona. And I want to talk about two studies and how I think we live somewhere in between. So, the first study, relatively simple, it's a facial feedback study. So, we bring you to the lab and we show you some funny cartoons and we ask you to rate how funny they are. But in one condition, we ask you to hold a pen in your mouth, sort of by the tip, like this. And in another, we ask you to sort of hold the pen sideways like this. Now, one of the interesting things that happens when you do this is when I'm holding it by the tip, it actually pulls my mouth muscles down, mimicking a frown. And when I hold it sideways, it actually pulls my facial muscles up into a smile. And that actually changes the way that we evaluate the cartoons. You think they're dramatically funnier when your face is already smiling. And that's because, in general, your body and mind want to agree. They want what you do and what you believe to line up. And so when you're already smiling, your mind says, well, I'm smiling. I must be okay. I must think this is funny. And so it influences you to think they're funnier. Vice versa, when you're holding it sort of by the tip and it pulls your mouth muscles to a frown, it says, oh, I'm frowning, I must not think this is very funny. So that's cognitive dissonance. It just has to do with facial feedback. And I think it's an interesting thing to reflect on in a time of COVID. Grin and bear it can actually help. It is important for us to be able to smile because it actually tricks our brain into thinking that we're happier. But there's a second study. And this one's a little more complicated. So we take restrained eaters, people who are dieting, and we make them carry around a baggie of Hershey's Kisses. And what we measure is, do they eat the chocolate? They have to carry it around all day. Do they actually eat it? And one group is given no instructions, right? Just try not to eat the chocolate. Another is given a strategy that says, all right, if you have temptation to eat the chocolate, distract yourself. Push those feelings away. Go do something else, like, move away from the triggers that might be causing that. And then a third group is given an instruction that says, hey, if you start to have those feelings, recognize them, accept them, just don't eat the chocolate. You can recognize that you have the feelings without acting on them. And so obviously, either strategy is actually dramatically better than no strategy at all. Both distraction and acceptance are very successful at getting us to change our behavior. But they're successful in different ways. So when you distract, it's actually very useful, right? Because it's very low cognitive load. It's pretty easy to do. It's easy to distract yourself with something else. And it doesn't require a lot of our brain. The problem with distraction is when it breaks, it really breaks, right? So it's good until you are no longer distracted, at which point, because you sort of now have these sort of pent up urges, they can come rushing back. On the flip side, asking somebody to accept their feelings but not act on them is very hard. It can be a very emotional, effortful process. It uses a lot of sort of cognitive resources, but it's very effective, right? Because it allows us to release those emotions, they tend not to come back up as a sort of a surge. And so why am I talking about these two studies? I think the facial feedback study is important because, as we all know, now is a time that we need to learn to laugh. We need to watch TikTok and create content and laugh with our families and talk with our families and be emotive. And sometimes just grinning and bearing it can be really important. But I think it would be foolhardy to say that grinning and bearing it was all that we needed to do right now. This is a massive, monumental loss of life. It affects everyone around the world. Everyone is quarantined. It's very difficult. And I think it would be sort of condescending to suggest that alone would be enough to sort of get people where they need to be. Kind of ditto for distraction, right? You can distract yourself, but when COVID is everywhere, in everything you do, it's hard to find something to distract yourself with. And finally, it's not easy to accept the emotions that we have right now because they're so big, right? It's so large and so hard to feel this way without sort of acting on those feelings. That can be hard. But a combination of all three, grinning and bearing it when we need to, distracting ourselves when we need to, and accepting our emotions when we need to, I think is a combination that can allow us to weather these difficult times. Humans are remarkable in the world for our ability to overcome adversity. And indeed, the adversity that we're trying to overcome is death. But the only reason death matters is that life is so worth living. It's so important. It is easy to lose sight of that at times, right? To focus on just beating the thing without understanding why we're trying to beat the thing. Life is very hard. Very, very hard right now in particular for many people. But it's still important and it's still worth living. And that's why it's so hard, right? The reason that we try so hard to beat death is because life is worth it. And so I hope you can keep those thoughts in mind. Think about those sort of 3 strategies as we go forward. And I look forward to talking to you all again as we get closer to the summit.